Hi, I'm Min and this is Mani, and we're going to run you through our perspectives as Young Democrats of SDP on what we feel are important issues pertaining to mental health. So mental health is an integral and essential component of our overall well-being, encompassing various key aspects of the self: emotional, psychological, and social. It affects the ways in which we think, feel, and act, and it also influences how well we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. As such, ensuring that one's mental health is adequately taken care of is important at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence right through to adulthood, and this is just as important as physical wellness. According to a 2018 mental health survey conducted by the Institute of Mental Health, approximately 14% of Singaporeans have experienced some form of mental health condition in their lifetime, and this is up from 12% in 2010. And mental illness may very well not remain purely mental. Mental infirmities are one of the top 5 contributors to disease burden in Singapore. This is evident in the fact that Singapore spends about $3.1 billion, or 18% of its total healthcare expenditure, on stress-related illnesses annually. This puts the nation's proportion of expenditure on these ailments second highest out of the 9 regions studied in the report, coming in just behind Australia's 18.8%.
We can also see that the number of suicides is rising at an alarming rate. Last year, Singapore reported 452 cases, the nation's highest count since 2012. Out of the total number, 154 were those of age 60 and above, the highest number recorded since 1991. And what is truly disturbing is the fact that suicide is the leading cause of death for those aged as young as 10 and those in their late 20s. And like the rest of the world, the state of mental health here in Singapore has greatly deteriorated due to circumstances engendered by COVID-19. Increased isolation, job insecurity, and loss of loved ones, to name a few. But across the board, we have identified aspects of life that are likely to cause people the most duress, namely economic inequality, or what is also known as socio-economic status, workplace culture, educational and parental pressure, and social stigma against mental illness. So let's dive right in to take a closer look at the issues that have a significant influence on our mental health. The first issue that we will be addressing will be economic inequality. Economic inequality generally refers to the disparity of wealth of income between different groups or within a society. Studies have clearly shown that higher rates of mental illness are found in highly unequal societies among the most affluent nations. But what are the psychological mechanisms possibly underlying the effects of economic inequality? How does it get under our skin and affect our emotional well-being and mental health? Living in more unequal societies makes us more concerned about our social status. The latter becomes the most important aspect in determining our self-worth, leading to a chronic concern known as status anxiety. Fundamentally, a person's perception of his or her standing in the social hierarchy is an important psychological mechanism linking mental health to income inequality. Life in societies with wide gaps between rich and poor creates ongoing social and psychological stresses, fueling constant fears about being perceived as unsuccessful by society in materialistic terms. There is consistent evidence supporting the link between social economic inequalities and poor mental health outcomes. There is a social gradient in mental health. This social gradient means that mental health problems are more common further down the social ladder. For those at the bottom, the experience of economic inequality is steeped in a sharp sense of public moral judgment. Financial concerns resulting from a lower socio-economic status are generally exhausting, demoralizing, and distracting for the individual. As mentioned earlier, economic inequality automatically emphasizes the importance placed on social status, as class distinctions are written into our psychology. When one identifies himself or herself from a lower class, it inflicts a psychological scar, bringing about feelings of self-doubt, low self-esteem, and inferiority complex that affects emotional well-being and increasing the risk of mental health issues.
And now, on to workplace culture. The mental well-being of working adults in Singapore is about 13% lower than the general population. And this is according to the Health Promotion Board, which conducted a survey with about 1,000 respondents. Data from another survey also indicates that 1 in 6 working adults in Singapore experiences a relatively high level of stress compared to 1 in 10 non-working adults. And there are many factors contributing to the stress and mental well-being of employees in a workplace. For example, this could take the form of a lack of control over their work, unrealistic demands, uncertainty over job security, and office politics, among other things. There's also constant overworking and weak work-life boundaries that can also place a significant degree of strain on one's mental health and result in debilitating burnout. It might be easier said than done though, given that values in the workplace are influenced by cultures in Singapore. By culture. Singapore is known to be a very collectivistic society, and this could affect employees being afraid to set boundaries for fear of upsetting their bosses or colleagues, and this at the expense of their own mental health. And because of this, it's easy for them to succumb to presenteeism. Then there's the issue of workplace bullying and harassment. A 2020 survey conducted by Kanta, which is a data, insights and consulting firm, polled 18,000 people across 24 industries in 14 countries, including about 1,000 people in Singapore. And that revealed that 24% of Singapore employees had been bullied in the workplace in the past year. And that's 1 in 4 of us, not particularly good. All this can be attributed to a few factors. For one, feeling dispensable as a result of hiring practices that have placed more people on term-based contracts rather than headcount positions, which increases the likelihood of employees accepting poor treatment in order to keep their jobs. Other reasons also come into play. For example, not actually being able to identify behavior that constitutes bullying, not trusting that their concerns will be adequately addressed by people or entities who have the means to effect the necessary changes, not knowing whom to turn to for help, or the fear of being perceived as weak. This issue has broader ramifications that affect not just an individual's welfare, and value creation, or productivity at the organizational level. There's also an economic impact. As mentioned earlier, the $3.1 billion we're spending every year to treat stress-related illnesses.
And all this trickles down to families and children. In recent years, there has been an exponential rise in cases of mental health disorders occurring in children and youths. Childhood mental health disorders in many cases stem from traumatic events, skewed perspectives on achievement, relationship issues, as well as certain natural genetic developments. However, the challenges faced by the youth of this era are different from those of decades ago, especially with social media, more pressure at school, and a change in wants and needs presenting a bigger influence. According to Associate Professor Daniel Fung, Chief Executive of the Institute of Mental Health, previous generations worked to meet basic needs, but youth today have higher level needs like self-esteem, resulting in worries about their purpose in life, which, if not addressed, can lead to mental health issues. Additionally, growing up with the internet and social media can make children feel inadequate. Mr. Asher Lowe, founder of youth mental health charity Limitless, explains, the comparison, stress, and feeling of not being good enough come with social media. The hyper-connectivity also results in youths here being more affected by overseas issues such as the Black Lives Matter movement, global warming, and other issues.
All this is made worse by the fact that stigma still exists, and in a pretty big way. Despite there being such a remarkable prevalence of mental illness in Singapore and Asia, people often hesitate to address the mental health ailments they are plagued by. And those who do usually only do so after quite a while beyond the onset of the condition. A 2018 study conducted by IMH found that 78.4% of individuals with mental health conditions never actually seek any form of professional treatment for their condition. And for those that do, the treatment delay remains quite significant. So this delay averages about 11 years for people with obsessive compulsive disorder, 4 years for those with bipolar disorder, 2 years for anxiety, and 1 year for depression. This phenomenon can largely be attributed to mental health stigma, which remains very dominant in countries that have collectivistic cultures like Singapore. Mental health stigma causes mental health disorders to be associated with negative, socially inappropriate behavior, rather than behavior that can be accepted and should be understood. Even among youths who have been more exposed to mental health as an issue, stigma remains a quandary. A 2017 study on mental health stigma in Singapore's youth found that some 45% or so of respondents associated mental health illnesses with unfavorable, derogatory terms such as stupid, dangerous, crazy, and weird, while about 46% of them said that they would be very embarrassed if they were diagnosed with a mental illness. This shows us how much more work we need to do to educate society on all things mental health. We also need to focus on building resilient support networks within families and among empathetic friends and colleagues. If we succeed in getting these communities to stop the perpetuation of and set the record straight on deep-rooted mental health stigmas, we can hope for some positive change across the board.
So there you have it, the Young Democrats' perspective on mental health issues we felt was important to highlight. Thanks for hanging out with us.
And now we're going to move on to the next segment of our show, Beneath the Surface, Insights into the Mental Health Crisis.
Hello everyone, welcome to Beneath the Surface, Insights into the Mental Health Crisis. The Mental Health webinar today is hosted jointly by the Council of Asian Liberal and Democrats and the Young Democrats of the Singapore Democratic Party. I'm Stanley, your host for today. Here with us on the panel today, we have SDP Chairman and Senior Infectious Diseases Physician, Professor Paul Tambyah, Founder of Rebound with Resilience, Mr. Kevin Wee, and Psychotherapist and Founder of heal.with.nav, Ms. Navroop Sood. We'll now discuss some of the themes that have emerged in Min and Mani's presentation. So I think one of the first things they brought up was that mental health is not just solely in the domain of the mental. So The question I wanted to ask the panelists is, how may mental health conditions affect our physical health?
Shall I start?
Sure, Prof Paul.
Yeah, so, it's not a direct correlation between mental health and physical health, but there are very close links between both mental and physical health. Because, for example, you have people who are very severely physically disabled who are mentally well adjusted, and at the same time, you've got people who are mentally very unwell who can be physically very fit. But those tend to be on the extremes. In the middle ground, you have a lot of people who, because of chronic physical conditions, experience severe reactive depression, difficulty in coping with the situation. And on the other side, you've got people who have mental health conditions who find it difficult to access medical care, partly because of bad experiences with the healthcare system or because of the inability to cope with complex treatment regimes or with complicated treatment plans. So I think there is a considerable overlap between physical and mental health. That's from the perspective of a physician over.
Yeah.
Yes, would the other panelists like to also provide their response?
Yeah. Should I go? Should I go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, as a mental health therapist, psychotherapist, I have observed there is a direct correlation between mental health and physical health. So, if someone is in chronic stress, if they are in chronically, constantly in fight, flight, freeze response, or now we have fawn response also, if they are constantly in that kind of zone, there is a buildup of toxic stress in the body. And when there is constant buildup of toxic stress in the body, of course, the immunity goes down. So your nervous system have direct impact on the immunity, the immune system. So from the perspective of psychotherapy, and now that therapy has evolved, we have a lot of evidence which says that body keeps the score. So whatever stress is built up in the body because of any mental health issue, because of any kind of stressor, will directly impact the physical health. Yes, when we say in terms of functioning, we have people with good physical health or probably the functioning level. They can function well, but still can carry the stresses. So it's like splitting up. I can compartmentalize when I go to job, I'm there fully and I'm able to perform, but mentally I'm carrying the stress. So sooner or later, the body is keeping the score and it's going to knock it, with that kind of pressure, and it may surface in terms of autoimmune disorder, fibromyalgia, or any kind of cold, flu, or unexplained skin diseases. So, from my perspective, I have seen that there is a direct correlation between, so people who come for treatment of anxiety, depression, OCD, they have these comorbidities wherein we see their skin diseases or some kind of low immunity. I mean, they fall easily sick. So that's what my observation is.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing. I think my experience I probably come from a more first-hand experience because I did face depression and mania after my A levels. I think we're going to talk about the pressure of exams and of course the intro video by Min talking about how cultural pressures actually affect our mental health. For me, that happened when I was 18, 19 years old, and I was fascinated at how my body actually followed those issues that I faced. Right, that I would languish as a term where I just don't feel like do anything. I just stay in my room the entire time. And my physical health also kind of deteriorated a little bit because I stopped exercising. Again, it could be a function of that. But there is a very kind of close link between the mind and the body. And it's, of course, Dr. Paul probably know best about this. But even then, it's so, even though we've studied for so many decades about this, right, still more is being discovered about the mind-body connection. And I think it's something we can explore. I guess we'll talk about throughout the panel discussion. Yeah.
Yes, thank you to all our panelists for your insights. For the next question, I think Mani has highlighted the fact that the difficulties faced by the economically disadvantaged, it often contributes towards poorer mental health. How has this been seen among individuals whom you have interacted with?
Yeah, quite some time. we have observed that these were called the diseases of affluent people, diseases of affluence, depression, anxiety, these things come to people who are rich. But more and more is being observed, especially in terms of lower economic status people or who are economically disadvantaged, because there's a constant pressure and constant stress, whether to use that money, that few dollars which we are earning, or they have that amount of restriction, whether to bring food to the table or buy something else. So there is constant choices, constant that pressure. And when one lives in that extreme pressure, there's of course a lot of stress, built up of a lot of stress, again low immunity, as I said earlier. But apart from that, there's constant anxiety. There is constant feeling of helplessness, where to go, who to reach. Even though you reach out to governmental agencies or family service centers, there's always a constant pressure, of paperwork and what will happen. This impending urgency, impending this uncertainty, which adds to the pressure. And more the pressure is, the body is going to react. So sometimes these people have this gets trickled down in their relationships. So there are anger issues. Then they start going into addictions because they want to self-soothe themselves, whatever comes. So all these things which it's a trap, it's one leads to another. So whether we say it's anger, addiction, relationships, domestic abuse, domestic violence, all these starts to trickle down because there's a lot of constant pressure and stress, and they feel no respite from it. There is no solution to it. So which adds to their cognitive distortions also. They cannot think properly. It's difficult to be in a constant state of stress and think in a rational way. So I think, yes, definitely, in economically disadvantaged people, and then comes the education also. Sometimes they don't have the means, the resources to continue education. So everything trickles down to, yes, there is a constant pressure, there's a constant stress, which may increase the possibility of having mental health issues, and vice versa. So it's, chicken and the egg, which comes first, but it's there. Yes, the problem is real.
Prof,
Kevin? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll just leave the best for last. So I'll go first. so I'll probably talk about, for sure. I mean, my work, just some context, is that I do a lot of work. I run a social enterprise dealing with youth. And every other day I'm there speaking to youth, hearing about their issues, helping them to navigate that. And what I found was that people with, of course, from lower income households, they do have, previous speaker mentioned, they do have a lot of load, cognitive load they have to deal with. And that added stress also adds to that, what they have to deal with. So imagine there's so many options that they have in, if let's say they are facing a mental health challenge, to be able to seek options, to be able to even go and take the next step, that in itself is actually a very high inertia already, because they have so many other things that they're dealing with, judgment from peers, family issues. So definitely economic background, I think, does play a huge part. But I would also say that on the flip side, it doesn't mean that those who are privileged may not necessarily face certain issues. What I found is that especially those in inverted commas, for lack of a better word, elite schools, they have challenges with their mental health for different reasons. And for them it could even be, just the added pressure to perform. And for them it even could be a face issue where parents are like, if relatives are knowing they are going to a therapist or seeking help, and it could be an added burden on them as well. Yeah, so I think that's just from my experiences. Yeah, over to you.
Yes. Yeah, so from a medical point of view, the significant impact of economics on mental health. And I'll tell you, for example, prematurity, adverse childhood outcomes. These are much more common in low-income women who do not have access to, they don't have the time to go for antenatal care. They can't take leave the same way that affluent women can. And the result of which is you have infants born with global developmental delays. And these can cause severe mental health disturbances in younger children. And in older adults, dementia rates are dropping in countries in Europe where people have access to good primary health care. Whereas in Singapore and many other countries, dementia rates are rising. And that's partly because primary healthcare is not so strong. And so people don't get access to some of the care that they need. The other thing is just from a purely practical point of view. If you want to refer someone to the child psychiatric clinic, for example, in IMH, the waiting time is really long for a subsidized patient. Whereas if you have the money to go and see a private psychotherapist or a private psychiatrist, you can go tomorrow. And that's a huge difference, because if you can identify the problem early, you can get referred to a therapist or a psychiatrist. You can actually try and arrest the problem before it gets too severe, and then you end up in the cycle which was described earlier by the previous speaker. Where you get addictions, where you get all these things, and you just go in a downward spiral. But if unfortunately in societies like Singapore or even the United States, where healthcare is viewed as a privilege rather than as a right, then you get a disparity between those who have access to good mental health care and those who don't.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Paul. You mentioned actually some of the issues that might be structural in nature. So I think for our next question, we can talk about what sort of societal or cultural changes may be necessary to improve mental health among individuals.
Kevin, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you for giving me the honor. I feel very strongly about this. I think one of my causes and I think lifelong missions would really be to shift culture. I think I'm very fascinated by how culture shapes behavior and how it influences the way people think. And I myself, coming out from a background where there's a lot of pressure and focus on grades, I realized how that impacted my mental health and how it, of course, not just me, but the people around me. And I think for a start, at least in our society, it's really to shift how we perceive failure and success. We have to redefine what we view success, because if kids have a very narrow definition of success, it's just certain variables, whether it's other people's opinions, a number of likes on now it's TikTok, right? Or even grades, for example. That's a dangerous place to be in, because their esteem goes up and down as well. So really to redefine how we view success, and also specifically how we redefine failure. Because I'm so fascinated that we talk about resilience, for example, and resilience requires a stressor, right? Requires something to adapt to. So you can argue that failure is necessary, setbacks are necessary in order to build that adaptability or that resilience. But it's a great irony that we punish and we stigmatize failure from a young age. And that in itself, that fear of failure, I think really could be a precursor or lead to certain issues that youth are facing, especially in what I've observed. Yeah, so for me, I think really is about shifting the way we view success, and also about failure, not just in youth, but also in parents and in wider society.
Yeah, thank you. I'm totally with that, Kevin. That the perceptual change, the perceptual shift is absolutely necessary. So instead of reprimanding and punishing, if we validate them, if we include them, if we give them that space wherein they feel open and vulnerable enough to come out and tell us that this is the issue, I think that's the shift which the society and the cultural need definitely needs. Because there is a stigma. What if people perceive me as weak if I come out? What if I become burden to my loved ones, and then I'll lose my friends, I'll lose the love of my family, maybe my colleagues would come to know and they would stigmatize me, they would not want to be with me, all those kind of pressures, and maybe it would affect my bonus. Who wants to get their bonus to get affected by this kind of issue? So I rather not come out and tell anybody about it. So the cultural shift is, specifically, in Singapore, when we talk about destigmatization, when we talk about, break the stigma, let's talk about it. It's more about how well we are able to accept it also. After we talk about it, we have to accept it when people say it, and not roll our eyes or say, oh my God, really? Are you going for therapy, or are you on medication? So these kind of validation, and acceptance from the society is very much required. Along with that, I think if we have more peer support groups, wherein, because as Dr. Paul rightly, pointed, there is a huge gap, huge disparity between the time when a person can go and seek help from IMH, the waiting time is too long as compared to if they seek private help. So of course, I also wonder at times when clients come to me and they are not able to afford that kind of thing, and then we have sliding scales, but still, we can't cater to everyone there. So that is the thing, if we can reduce that kind of disparity in some way, because I have people coming up and asking me, oh, do you accept MediSave? So we don't have that kind of provision here in terms of government way of addressing it. So if we can come up with something like that, policies to improve, not just improve and enable people to reach out to therapists and seek help in timely fashion, in timely way, and which can also help to reduce this kind of pressure of where to go, who to seek help, and that disparity is reduced in some way.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, because I think this separation of mental health and physical health in terms of reimbursement and subsidies is very unhealthy, because it only reinforces the stigmatization. You can use MediSave for some therapy, physical therapy, but to get psychotherapy from MediSave, it's just not it's not on the books, you see. And this is something that advocates need to speak up for. And I think it will change. With time, these things do change. In fact, interestingly enough, last year in Parliament, Anthea Ong asked the minister this question as to whether the public service would do away with the question on job application forms. Have you had a mental health problem? And the minister at that time, it was Chan Chun Sing, in charge of the public sector. He said that, yeah, they were going to do away with it. But, it's very striking, even though the public sector supposedly does away with this question about mental health. I just went and Googled the application forms for registration as an allied health professional in Singapore. And they ask you two questions. First question, are you impaired in any way? And then you have to declare. And then the second question they ask you is, have you seen a psychiatrist? That doesn't make sense. You see, if you've got a physical illness, you're impaired, then you answer the first question, yes, I have a physical illness, but I'm not impaired. Then why is the relevance of the second question? So it seems to be a contradiction there. And I think this is something that even in the medical field, I was talking with a group of medical students last week, and they said so many of the students are so afraid to come and get medical care for their mental health issues because they are afraid that they will have to make a declaration when they go and register with the medical council. So it's not just the medical council; it's also the allied health council. It's also even the nursing board. So I think as professions, we need to lead the way in destigmatizing mental health and treating mental health just like any other condition. You injured your leg, you need some physical therapy. You've had a stressful situation, you need some psychotherapy to help you cope with it. So I think that's the way we need to move forward. And those in authority who make the policies need to hear from people on the ground about that.
Okay, a very big thank you to our panelists for addressing some of the issues in mental health and some of the challenges we may face and the policies that may be needed to effect better health outcomes for society. We have reached the end of the first half of our panel discussion. For our next segment, we'll watch this short video titled Honest Conversations.
Sure.
Okay, hi Salim. Thank you for setting time aside to come on board this discussion. So this segment is called Honest Conversations, and we would like to talk to individuals who have suffered or are still suffering from mental health disorders or issues that you are struggling with. So right now, may I have like a self-introduction or a bit of your history? Can you tell us a bit of about yourself?
Okay, sure. My name is Abdul Salim. Okay, back in last year, in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, in October 2020, I was first diagnosed as having this acute stress disorder, by the polyclinic. Then from there, in November, I was told to see a psychologist at the same polyclinic where I was diagnosed as having a depression. And my case was transferred from the polyclinic to the Tan Tock Seng Hospital. Yeah.
Okay. So can you describe to us how this episode started? What were the first emotions or first feelings you felt, and when was the first point of time you realized, hey, okay, I need to go to the clinic or I need to seek help?
Frankly speaking, at first I was not aware of it. Okay, it's actually starting from September, where I find that I start to get irritated much more easily, and I get agitated over small little things. Okay, for all my close friends who knows me, they know that I'm a happy-go-lucky person. Okay, always laughing, smiling, all that kind of things. And somehow in September, my behavior, my mood started to change. Yeah. Then a few of my close friends actually noticed this change of behavior, and actually they advised me to seek help because they say that I'm not the person I used to be. Yeah, I'm having all the mood swing, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So my next question, actually, you had answered it earlier, but this question is pertaining to the avenues of help and treatment that you sought. So it was first a polyclinic first, and then after that they sent you to a hospital. And
hospital, yes.
Okay. So what was the kind of treatment you got from the hospital, and how did this help you reduce the symptoms? Or if the hospital referred you somewhere else, maybe you can talk about that as well.
Actually, I mean a psychologist at Tan Tock Seng. Okay, the first time when my case was transferred from the polyclinic to the hospital, I was given the sleeping pill because I'm having some sleeping disorder. I'm not able to sleep at night. Okay, trouble sleeping. And actually, I stopped taking the med halfway because I find that it only works the first few days. But after that, I find that I'm immune to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Still, I mean, like back to square one, having trouble sleeping, that kind of thing. Yeah. So they set aside for me an appointment in early this year in January. So I told him that, okay, I already stopped taking the medication, and I discussed with my psychologist, and actually both of us agree that we shouldn't be slave to this medication. So I find an alternative way of trying to cope with whatever stress and situation I'm going through.
Okay.
So what? Yeah.
So you said that you discussed with your psychiatrist that then maybe you all decided to wean off the medication or to halt the medication for a bit, and then you said that you tried to use other ways to cope. Yeah. How did you learn of these ways? Do you like read online, or did you did you visit like a behavioral therapist or someone who helped you who helped equip you with other tools? Was there someone like this?
Yeah, actually, after I've been diagnosed with this depression, I actually posted on my Facebook, hey, I mean, so people start to messaging, they message me, SMS me, WhatsApp me, in messengers, all that, hey, actually they also going through the same way. And actually some of them actually also did not take medication, but then they go for long walks, by your own, just free your mind. And actually they told me that by walking, all these things, actually it helps to cool down yourself, to calm down everything. Yeah.
Okay.
So I just give it. Then from that on, I start to go for long walks. Yeah.
Okay. Because we live in a society that's like so fast paced, right? And knowing that there were people out there who were suffering in similar ways, and then also hearing from so many people, some you never heard of in a long time, did that help you feel like you have a support or community of people who you can reach out to, or did it make you feel better in any way knowing all these things?
Honestly speaking, I feel that I'm quite lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones who have a strong support among my inner circle, because from what I heard with others who have shared with me, their inner circle of friends are not that supportive. They've been labeled as attention seeker, and say, oh, you're just making all this thing up, So they're going through that moment without any support from anyone, anyone close to them. For me, I feel quite lucky. My friends were like supporting me all the way. They are not looking at me in a, how come you got this mental, Some people thought that I'm mad. Yeah. But luckily for me, my friends all very supportive, quite supportive. And actually this gives me the strength to actually to go back to my normal self. Moving forward.
Which is why we always talk about stigma, right? So like if we can bring down the stigma when people are more open to knowing or to communicating and interacting with people who are suffering in certain ways, it also helps the whole healing process as well.
Yeah. So actually, one thing I also want to take note is that there are people who are really concerned about you, okay? But then the words they use actually will do more harm.
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah, because frankly speaking, I've got one personal experience. Okay. Actually, she's one of my FB friend, and she tried to help me. But then the way she was saying that, oh, you should kneel down and pray to God, seek for forgiveness. So I was totally stunned,
Yeah.
I mean, have I done something wrong until you have to? I know that your intention is to help me.
Yeah.
But the words you use is not helping me at all.
Yeah.
So this thing, people should be, how should I put it?
I get what you mean. I think because we are not saying that religion doesn't provide any support. We're not saying that at all. But sometimes when someone is suffering or in pain, you try to you're asking for something that you can do right now to lessen that. And some of these things we may, at that point of time, it may not seem as that helpful. Even though, of course, there is a long-term truth to it, like, religion helps people cope. It helps people have hope in something else as well. Yeah. So, okay, now we actually we have moved to the last part, and this is actually one of the most important parts, because we're going to link back to our panel discussion, and because we have Professor Paul Tambyah, we have Dr. Navroop Sood, we have Kevin Wee, and we have Stanley who's moderating right now, and they are watching your video as well. What would you wish to understand a little more about mental health in general, or maybe something specific to your condition that you feel will help you cope better in the future? If you knew, it could be certain hard questions that you had before regarding your condition. What do you feel some of these questions?
Okay, at first I thought that after the early part of this year, once I start to do all my walking, all that, right, I find that I'm more calm, I'm more peaceful. So I thought that maybe I'm already out of this situation, but somehow in August, it triggers back. Yeah. So look at it. How can we avoid putting ourselves in a similar situation? You thought that, okay, I'm recovered, it's been a few months and nothing happened to me. Then out of the blue, something trigger you and then you start to explode. How could we avoid going into this situation? Because I remember that in August, I had such an outburst out of the blue where I started to scold my colleagues, the people around me. I just shout, out of the blue. And my whole body was trembling and shaking. Yeah.
So your question would be, how do we, sometimes when we feel that, we're getting better, or we are, on the road to some form of recovery, we're doing something new. How do we ensure, or rather, how do we prevent it from re-emerging? How, So how do, so maybe, so maybe the panelists could answer that question, as well as maybe signs to kind of be able to forecast that something is coming up, before it becomes a big blow up. So that's one.
So what is so lucky for me, because I was in the early stage. So it's not. So it's not that serious, because what the psychiatrist was telling me was that a lot of people, they do not know that they're actually going through depression, and then when they realize it, it's really like in the later part. So what can be done, so that people will be more willing to seek help in the early part of the stage.
That's a good question. And do you have any other questions, or that is one of your main questions, the burning questions you've been asking? Okay, sure. So thank you so much, Salim, for this, for sharing, for agreeing to share about these conditions. And we're going to throw this segment back to the panel, and we will let them answer this question right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to Salim for a very sincere reflection of your personal experiences and your struggle with mental health. I think let's start with answering Salim's questions. One of his questions is, how can we encourage individuals to seek help at the early stages of mental health struggles? Perhaps Prof Paul, you could start this discussion.
Okay, I think the key has got to be destigmatization. And I think, a lot of that has come through, there's some data on that. In fact, the IMH did a large study looking at the treatment gap. That means people who have a condition but don't seek medical help. And what they found is very surprising. They found that the treatment gap was actually worse amongst the high income and the employed compared to the unemployed. They found that the unemployed actually, for most conditions, except for I think it was OCD, had for things like substance abuse, like major depressive disorders. And I think one interpretation of that is that people who are employed feel that they have more to lose if they are found to be, as Navroop pointed out, if they have some kind of something wrong with them, or if they're on therapy. So I think this is a major thing which needs to be dealt with, the stigma that's associated with seeking help. And I think there are ways to address it. The first way is the structural approach. And like I said, it's a good thing that the public sector say that they're not asking questions about mental health in job applications. But I think that has to go across the board, and even in the medical and healthcare professions as well. And I think, you look at the media, the way people with mental illnesses are portrayed in the media tends to be very negative. They're always portrayed as the crazy guy, or the super depressed one, doesn't want to talk to anyone, or the OCD person who is just behaving weirdly. So I think, or the drunk, who is creating a problem for his whole family. So we have very, very few positive portrayals in the local media of individuals who have been dealing with mental health issues and who have come through it. So I think these are some of the things that need to be dealt with. Over.
Kevin, perhaps you want to continue.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, first of all, Salim, from my heart, I just want to say, sorry, just a bit of an echo.
It's better now.
I'll just carry on. You all can hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I just first of all want to say, Salim, I really appreciate you sharing from your heart. I really felt that no, it's not easy to be vulnerable in front of an audience like this. But that was my journey as well. I think it was really difficult to come out and say that I'm struggling and to be vulnerable and say that, you know what, I need help. And I think Dr. Paul rightly pointed out the treatment gap. It has shown it has decreased a bit, but it's still quite a big gap from some of them up to a few years. So it's very worrying. And I think one thing has to start with empathy. I just want to share about empathy because I think it's sorely lacking for some reason, even though it's such a powerful connector. But even one example, for example, is the PSL. Recently we had the PSL results. And I always see things, every time there's results there, I always see things going around, grades do not matter, right? And it's great. I mean, it's great that we kind of push the narrative out there, right? But I think we also must be very careful that we don't invalidate the emotions that people are feeling in that moment. And I tell students that, hey, actually, to you, right, that is nonsense at this point of time. To some of you at least, right, if I tell you now that grades don't matter, you wouldn't believe me. Because how can it not matter when you spend hours practicing and revising, right? When you have expectations for your schools to go to and you can't get in, to you it matters at that moment. And to a lot of people facing certain struggles, right, in that moment, it matters to them. And we need to acknowledge that without projecting our feelings or without silver lining it by saying, oh, at least that, at least we didn't do that, at least this, at least that, or saying things like, you know, actually you're not so bad, other people are worse off than you. And I think those barriers actually cause people to close up and feel very small and disempowered. You know, and rarely does an immediate response make things better.
Definitely.
Right? Empathy is what comforts and not projection. So I think that's where I hope to just share whoever's listening to this, you can make a difference by just empathizing and, you know, giving people that safe space. And I think in future they will be more empowered to seek help if they have that. Yeah. The second question I think we'll leave it for later about how do you notice certain changes. I have personal experiences that I want to share with Salim, but I'll hand you over to Dr. Navroop first. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Salim. You know, it was a very honest and courageous conversation wherein you come on screen like this and talk to the world about your issues and mental health struggles. So it takes a lot of courage. So I salute you for that, because when you open up, you know, you remove a lot of barriers of stigma. Because you broke that wall of stigma and you became the leader in that. So thank you so much for that. And coming to your question, you know, how we can support our family or friends to seek help earlier. And as Dr. Paul said, you know, we have to remove the stigma, which we all are doing right now also by initiating this conversation. And as Kevin rightly mentioned, empathy. So I'm going to put it in a way, in a same thing, but in a different package. So, you know, when you reach out to your friends or family, give them the gift of your presence. They are not broken. Don't try to fix them. Don't advise, don't judge, don't criticize. You know, when we, with all good intentions, as Kevin was mentioning, you know, marks matter to those PSLE students. Yes, they matter to them. You cannot say, oh, don't judge yourself by your marks, it's not worth it, all those things. So there are three kinds of response, you know, when we are talking to someone who is having mental health struggle. One is an average response, you know, as Salim was mentioning, you know, people will tell me to do this, do that. That's an average response. When they tell you, you can do this, you can go to a therapist, all those things. Then there is a toxic response, which Salim also highlighted. Kneel down and pray to God. You may have done something wrong. That's a toxic response with all good intentions. You know, that's a toxic positivity being forced. You may have done something wrong, or why don't you look at what, focus on good things in your life? You know, you have so much to be thankful about. Why you are so depressed? Look at your family, look at, you have food on your table. All those things, that is toxic positivity being pushed. And then there is empathetic response. This is called trauma-informed response, where you connect with the humanity and the struggle of the other individual. where you connect with your own being, with the essence of another human being, and you tell them, I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready, it's okay. I just want to journey with you. I'm just here present for you whenever you are ready. So you just give them your presence without pushing them, without analyzing them. Again, when we say all these things, there can be n number of things while we are saying it. My tone, the way I'm coming across. So it's not that I'm saying it for the sake of saying it, my words, but my tone, my response. So what I'll say is attitude. One is your attitude when you're talking to that person, your communication, how you're communicating it, your choice of words, empathy, and then expression. So if all four are good, we are sorted. We can help our loved ones, because otherwise, with everything nice, even if you tell your spouse or your child, hey, I think you need therapy, they'll say, what? You need therapy? Do you think I'm mad or what? So there's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of this pressure that I'm okay, and I have to be okay. This social media look, I have to be perfect all the time in each domain of my life. So it's like, why do I need therapy? You need therapy. It sounds like an abuse or infringement of boundaries. Whereas if someone is struggling physically in their physical health, and we tell them, hey, let me take you to doctor and help you out with this issue, they'll be very grateful. They'll be grateful to you and they'll be thankful to you. But same thing, if you tell about mental health, they'll say, no, why? Why should I? What did you notice? Why you're telling me that? So that kind of stigma. So how we come across as another human being, connecting with their humanity and not labeling them with a disorder, not because especially in mental health, this word disorder, it's very stigmatizing. So if we call them as adaptations, natural human adaptations, which they really are, let me tell you, they are really natural human adaptations. They are self-soothing behaviors. That's how your nervous system respond to the stress. That's natural. You don't get to decide. You don't choose depression. You don't choose to be angry. You don't have a choice. It happens like this. So your nervous system responds to the stressors and devise a survival plan for you. Okay, let me start, depending on substance for this, because it gives me the sense of control and it soothes me. So that is a nervous system deciding for you, not your rational brain deciding. So that's the point when we want to support our loved ones and enabling them with early interventions.
Thank you very much. I hope that this answers Salim's question, and also for our viewers, hope that you have gained some insights into how you may assist your relatives and peers into seeking an early intervention into mental health. Next up, Salim's experiences has also shown that the worsening of mental health may be abrupt, like it may be triggered even though he's on the path to wellness. So how may we as individuals or as society address this? Perhaps starting with Dr. Paul.
You're on mute, Dr. Paul.
Sorry. Yeah. So I'd like to join in what Kevin and Navroop pointed out, that it's really brave of Salim. And I want to make a little confession of my own in that I've known Salim for 10 years and I had no idea what he was going through until he actually posted on his Facebook that he was admitted, and I have a joint appointment in Tan Tock Seng, so I managed to sneak into the hospital even though there are no visitors allowed. I went to see somebody as a consult and a patient in another ward who I was required to see, and on the way out, I said, could I stop by and see him? And I managed to do that. And it just showed, you see, he's always such a smiley guy, a cheerful, positive person. And so it came as a shock, to realize that he was going through this depression. And I think that was a reminder that even as a medical professional, sometimes we're blinded and we don't realize what people are going through. It was interesting. My friend Robin Lowe took Salim on long rides on his bike, and that seems to have helped him in some way or another. So I think the key, what Navroop was saying, is just being present, being around. So so that, that was the circuit breaker time, and we were not able to meet together, and so it had been a long time, since I'd seen Salim. So it was, like I said, he looked the same, but what was going on inside of him was completely different, and I think that was just a wake up call in a way for me.
Yeah. Maybe I'll talk about the question. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe, yeah. So I think I definitely second what Dr. Paul mentioned. For me especially, it was a complete shock to my peers and to my parents, whom I grew up as a perfect kid as well, doing well my studies in sports, but just because of the added pressure of A levels and confluence of factors, it led to a mental block during my A levels. So I handed up blank papers for math, and that was a major trigger that just caused a whole swing to the other side. And it really came as a shock to my family, who didn't know how to deal with it. Right, so I think before I go to the next point, just to end on the previous point, I think caregivers' mental health also need to be kept in mind, because it's really not easy, coming from my parents' perspective, to care for someone that's going through a mental health condition. And I think we don't have time. This is probably don't have time to go into details about that. But if you're interested in it, you can check out Caregivers Alliance. I think you just go to Caregivers Alliance. They have free courses and resources there to help caregivers specifically. I think their work's not talked about enough. I think a lot of caregivers struggle as well. Yeah, so that's one. The other thing is how to identify. On the individual level, I like to give this analogy when I speak to youth as well on stress, right? It's like, I always say every ideal is a judge. Right? When you have an ideal, you haven't met that yet, that creates a creative tension that judges you that, hey, I haven't got there yet, creates anxiety. And imagine it's a rubber band, right? And I say that right now, I give you a competition. You're going to pull the rubber band to the maximum, and whoever hits the maximum will actually win the prize. However, if it snaps, you don't win the prize. So I asked them what would they do, right? Let me say, I'll make it slow, just to ensure that, I don't break it, and then I'll slowly bring it up. But the thing is, the question I pose back to them is that, how will you know when it's going to snap, right? And because of that pressure to perform it, and because of that prize at the end, whether is it artificial or whether is it imposed or what, you have that desire to stretch it as much as you can. And I think that's where the challenge comes in. And as individuals, you are very clear, listening to your body and where that breaking point is, where that snapping point is. And for me now, I think overcoming my challenges, right, I become a bit more attuned to if certain stresses are coming up, certain things in my body I'm feeling. Then I take concrete steps to actually pause, to kind of ensure my nervous system doesn't get too excited. Or like what Navroop said, gets too, all over the place. So I think that's just a simple thing. Just be attuned to your body and be aware. But of course, I'd love to hear from both of you as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. That was really nice, that rubber band example. I'm going to use it with my clients too. You never know when it's going to snap. So there comes a tipping point. So how I put it is, when the pain increases too much, it's way beyond my nervous system to manage it. There comes the tipping point, and we dissociate. Either we dissociate, or there is depersonalization, derealization, or we call it breaking point in layman terms. There is a breakdown. We burn out, we start to languish, all those things, in workforce, we talk about it. So the thing is, why there is a pain, and the pain continues to happen, and we are not attuned to it. We are not attuned. We are not listening to what's happening. So Salim asked, how do we know, that the tipping point is coming, or how do we know where is that coming? So the thing is, you have to be attuned to your body. You have to be proactive, as in case of physical health. When it comes to physical health, we all know we have to eat balanced, nutritious meals. We have to exercise. We have to take supplementation. We are very, very, very careful in terms of hygiene, everything. But when it comes to mental health, it's like, what do we do? How do we take care of our mental health? So I want to give one small tip. Toxic thoughts lead to toxic chemicals in the body, release of toxic chemicals in the body, and tonic thoughts release tonic chemicals in the body. So it's up to you. You have to be guard of your, rational brain, of your thoughts. What are you feeding yourself? Am I following wrong social media accounts? Am I watching wrong news? What am I doing? What do I want to feed myself? It's again, we are increasing our resilience, our capacity. We call it window of tolerance. We want to increase our window of tolerance, not that we want us to, overstress ourselves or take on more and more and more. I'm not stressing being overachiever. Window of tolerance means that when life stresses comes and they knock me down, I will have those human emotions. I will feel sad, mad, angry, all those emotions, but I will bounce back. I will bounce back faster, and I'll not stay there at rock bottom for too long, making it a big mental health struggle for myself. These things happen because our internal resilience, it goes down. Again, it's not willpower. It's not willpower. We are not talking about willpower here. It's internal resilience, internal capacity. So the people, when we talk about grief, we all have lost one or the other person in our lifetimes. We know what happens. We integrate back into life. Life continues. It doesn't mean that we have forgotten those people. They are still in our memories. We have good memory about those people, but we move on. We integrate back. Same way, we bounce back from whatever life throws at us. So we are grounded, we are stable. There may be winds blowing, but we will bounce back and we'll be centered and grounded again. So being proactive in your approach to mental health, which definitely involves exercising also. So that's the good part of exercise, because I'm sure Dr. Paul would agree with me, because when we exercise, there is, how it is related to mental health. Behind the scenes, there is vagal maneuver. We are talking about vagus nerve here. So there's vagal maneuvering happening. And when you hack your vagus nerve, all your good neurotransmitters starts to release. So that's one way of hacking your vagus nerve to a happier you. So we can do that. That's how you hack your nervous system also.
Thank you very much, all our panelists. I think we've come to the end of our panel discussion. I hope that our viewers have gained some valuable insights into how to both advocate for better mental health in society and also to support their friends, their family in the road to better mental health, and most importantly, themselves, safeguarding and taking care of their own mental health. So once again, a very big thank you to Dr. Paul Tambyah, Mr. Kevin Wee, and Ms. Navroop Sood for being on our panel today. And also a very sincere thanks to Abdul Salim for sharing his very deep and personal experiences. And lastly, our Young Democrats, Min and Mani, for sharing their perspective. We have had a fruitful discussion for today. And I've been your host, Stanley Tan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
See you.